When I begin teaching psychology, one of the first things I talk about in my class is I ask my students the question of why it took us so long to study ourselves scientifically, because we studied the universe and the stars and everything else before we kind of looked at ourselves. And when you ask why, well, that's because for many, many years, we really considered ourselves different from the rest of the planet. Everything else was physical. Maybe we were partly physical. We can go to Rene Descartes' notion of dualism, but the notion was we always had a soul or something metaphysical to us. And of course, science is about understanding how the physical processes work. And so if we are spirits in the machine, spirits in the material world, then it didn't really make sense to study ourselves scientifically, because metaphysical things can behave in non-physical ways that you cannot capture with science. So to some extent, the birth of psychology is a story about us starting to question our metaphysicalness. Like, do we have this sort of metaphysical aspect to us? Or are we, in fact, also just sort of materialistic beings, very complex biological machines? And if we start to think maybe we are, then that part of the machinery we can study with science. And so as psychology was born, it was more and more people thinking about things like consciousness, but thinking about them in physical terms. In fact, one of the very first things we could talk about is the father of psychology, Wilhelm Wundt. He started doing a form of psychology that was all about, it's called structuralism. It was taking the periodic table of elements, what they did in the physical sciences, where they think, everything is a combination of certain physical elements. He wanted to know, what were the elements of conscious experience? If we look at this subjective awareness, this consciousness we have in our minds, could we identify what that is built out of? What are the components? And he included things like sort of emotional arousal. Certain things make you feel, more excited or more relaxed. And so he was trying to find out, what are these components of conscious experience? And those were the very first experimental studies in psychology.